And we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Ozyamandias Ramses II, or just call me Ozzy. I'm joined in a Google Hangout this evening with Ilana Fireflower and Francis Roy. We're here to have a discussion about feminism, men's rights, the men's rights movement, egalitarianism, sexism, and rape apologetics. And the reason we're having this conversation is because it's following on the heels of something that happened recently on the Magic Sandwich Show. Francis reached out to me and was interested in pursuing the discussion because I was involved in an episode of the Magic Sandwich Show that dealt with all of these questions. To give you the backstory, a YouTuber by the name of Thunderfoot made a couple of videos, one in particular, on the subject of rape, in which he was objecting principally to a certain message within feminist discourse, people who are concerned about rape and reducing the incidence of rape. And the message in a brochure pamphlet said, someone correct me if I'm getting this wrong, don't tell me how to dress, teach your boys not to rape, or words very close to that effect.
No, it wasn't in a pamphlet. It was on a sign.
It was on a sign. That's right. I'm sorry. So he quoted that from a clip from a video, and he was arguing that this was wrong-headed. And this was going to be, I think, a short topic of discussion on the Magic Sandwich Show. That's episode 62, if any of you are interested in going back and looking at it. I'll warn you, it went on for 7 hours. It was made in 2 parts. And the discussion that was supposed to take just a short bit stretched into 7 hours. And I joined the conversation a little late, but I participated in it, and there were some really interesting and heated moments there. So that's what we're here to talk about all the subjects related to that, see if we can shed a little light on that and air out our thoughts and ideas. Now, the reason we have Francis here is he reached out to me and said, I'd like to talk to you about these things a little further. And he is a men's rights activist, or at least self-identifies as part of the men's rights movement. I've never actually spoken live with someone who self-identifies that way, so I'm actually interested in hearing his views on the matter. Now, we're not going to be inviting anybody into the conversation either at all, or at least not until much later in the conversation. But we do have a comment tracker running, and I think Ilana is going to be taking a look at the comment tracker and letting us, feeding us some comments and questions if we see anything that we think we can inject into the dialogue here. Okay, so how about I just turn it over to Ilana to say hello.
Sorry, I had my mic shut off. Hi, everybody. I'm looking forward to this as well.
And my name's Francis Roy. I currently live in Quebec. I called because there was a perspective that I felt probably needed some clarification. My intent behind this conversation, somebody had left a comment in the Google Plus comments saying, "Oh, this is bound to be a fiery a discussion with a lot of fiery rhetoric." That's not my intent. My intent is for good people of goodwill to discuss and to learn and to explore. I stand open to correction for anything at any time if it's justified. I don't come from the angry point of view, and I think people would be surprised to find out that a lot of men really don't. A lot of us have learned to let go of the anger. So part of what I want to do, aside from discussing the issues, is bring to an audience those who are unfamiliar with the MRM, one man's perspective of why he does it, what it's like, what it's about from my perspective. I don't claim to speak for anyone other than myself, and that's about it. So.
Okay, well, if you don't mind, why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your perspective and how you came to self-identify as a men's rights activist or part of the men's rights movement?
All right. Well, for me, it started, oh, believe it or not, when I was about 5 years old. I had a childhood that wasn't necessarily the land of cupcakes and jelly beans. Um, I observed that there was a difference between someone's rhetoric and someone's behavior. What they said and what they did didn't always match up, but of course, as a 5-year-old, as a teenager, as a young man, I didn't necessarily have the mental framework to express some of the thoughts. A lot of my thoughts weren't clarified until a little bit later in life. There's a whole variety of experiences that I would try to bring up to other people, and when I did, was basically mocked for, laughed at, looked at with incredulity. And it took me a while to wrap my head around this whole gender item. I was a feminist for a while. In fact, I lived 10 minutes away from where the protests happened in Toronto. And I lived with precisely the kind of feminists that were protesting there for about 3 years.
Now, just sorry to interject, the protests you're talking about, you're alluding to the protests that happened at the University of Toronto when some feminists were objecting to a men's rights movement
The
talk.
Warren Farrell event.
Right. Warren Farrell's a men's rights activist, a public speaker, and he was going to give a talk there, and some feminists sort of
When was this?
showed up and protested.
Oh, it was last year. If you do a YouTube search for Warren Farrell U of T, you'll see a whole bunch of videos. You might look for Studio Brûlé as somebody who recorded a lot of it. Essentially, what happened is.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to derail you there. There was an illusion there. I thought I clarified. We don't need to go into that unless it's germane to your story.
Well, it's germane in the sense that Warren Farrell is a men's rights activist. He's about the nicest guy in the world. He was originally part of the board of NOW, National Organization for Women, I believe for 3 years or so. And over time, his opinion of what is currently referred to as feminism changed. He started asking some questions and eventually found that, again, the rhetoric didn't necessarily match the facts. He wrote his original book, Why Men Are the Way They Are, is the book that really started me clarifying on the path. So eventually what happened is I spent some time trying to figure out, why is it that I'm always accused of being this? I'm accused of being that. I remember at 5 years old asking my mother, Mom, why is it that I'm a male chauvinist pig?
At 5 years old?
At 5 years old, and might even been younger. And, so it shows you just where this sort of thing started, It's like I was alive in the very early 70s where a lot of this was starting up. And so it colored my life. Got to a point finally when I just got tired of being beaten up for being a male. And
sorry, could I stop you right there?
yes.
Like, in what respect were you beaten up as a male? Like, this doesn't square with my experience, so I'm interested.
Okay. There are a lot of instances when you become aware of it, how men and women are treated differently. Feminists will say that women are treated horribly in all instances at all times, and that men essentially have all the power and they live an ideal life. My experience was exactly the opposite of that. All the authorities in my life were females, or all the authority figures were females. Most of the treatment that I saw towards males was generally viewed in a less positive. Excuse me. A lot of the way men were treated was not necessarily as forgiving as it is for women. The most obvious and simple thing, for example, women can cry, men can't. If women cry, that's natural. If men cry, it's considered an abomination. You're not a real man if you express yourself. Men must be the doers. Women are typically viewed as recipients. Men as perpetrators, women as victims. This narrative you see a little bit everywhere, and it's so ingrained. It's in the presuppositions of our culture that until you take the time to look at things and you do a lot of role reversing, it's easy to miss. Examples would be that only men can rape and men cannot be raped. I've heard people say that men can't be raped. Well, the facts show otherwise. So
Well,
these,
certainly get raped by men, by other men in prisons, and I understand to some extent they get raped by women. But that is, I can understand why people find that harder to believe.
yes, because men are typically viewed as perpetrators, as doers. Women are typically viewed as victims or recipients.
Well, I also think it's because there's a certain category of rape that perhaps can't be perpetrated by a woman on a man in the exact same way. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about coerced rape, that can be perpetrated by a woman on a man. But when you're talking about sort of stranger forcible rape, I think
Yes.
there are very, very few instances of woman on man stranger forcible rape. And that's the category that all women really fear. You know, deep in our hearts, the one we fear is stranger forcible rape.
Okay.
So I think that's probably why, or at least one of the reasons why people don't think of men as being rape victims of women in the same way.
Right.
And also, and I don't agree with this, but I think that because men have to get it up to get raped, there's the sense that men must really be enjoying it when it happens to them. Now, I
That's right.
don't agree with that because, I mean, women would hate it if you said to them, you know, if you get wet, that it's not rape, right? So
Exactly.
that's not fair,
It's
and
not
I
a
agree with
normal
that.
response.
I'm sorry?
It's an autonomic response.
Um, well, yeah. In some cases, it is. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the time when a woman gets raped, they don't, but it doesn't matter. If they do, it's still rape. And so in that situation, it would be rape for a man too. But I think that's the reason the fact that men can't be stranger raped, they can't be attacked in the same way by a woman. That
Why do you think that?
um, because women just aren't strong enough to take down a man in the same way.
Well, I suppose this brings me to one of the points that I want to talk about is during the Magic Sandwich Show, there was a lot of discussion about what is rape. I, for one, would like for us to take the word rape out of our vocabulary simply because it's an emotionally charged term that generates more heat than light. These days, what I've taken to doing is, well, what does the Canadian government do? It creates laws, and the law is known as a sexual assault. There are 3 levels of sexual assault, very simplistically, ranging from I don't like what is being done to me to physical to physically hurting somebody, you know, grabbing them, holding them on, causing them pain, to the extreme, which is injuring, maiming, creating damage. Every one of these levels, if you, I would recommend to everybody to go to their favorite search engine and type in Criminal Code of Canada. Go to the HTML, the one long page HTML version, and take a look. It starts at about section 150, then it skips around a little bit, then around 270 it starts back on that specific subject. I think that by reading what has already been explored and what is actually encoded in law by not unbright minds, that it would remove a lot of the ambiguity that we have. Rape is on its own an ambiguous term, and it's an emotionally charged term, which carries with it baggage and presupposition. I've heard people say rape must include penetration. you know, whether it's a woman penetrating a man with her finger or whether it's a man penetrating a woman with his penis, it must involve penetration. But that's not always the case. What I like about the Canadian law is that it is gender neutral. It does not assume that the man is a rapist. It assumes that a human is doing something either with or to another human. And so that's why I prefer to diffuse this ambiguous, emotionally charged word with something that has been a lot better thought out, and quite frankly, we have to live with because it is enforced by law. So I think that's a really good starting point. Now, if you're not Canadian, look at the laws in your own country, see what it has to say. But I think you'll find them to be rather comprehensive, and there would be a lot less muddling around on everyone's part trying to define what it is, because we already have it defined in a practical sense.
Okay, I wonder if I can jump in here.
Yeah.
As a continuation of the discussion that happened on the Magic Sandwich Show, we're sort of departing a little bit because we're sort of getting into sort of, you know, different kinds of rape and degrees of rape, and not that that's not important. Obviously, it's very important because it goes to what falls under the definition of rape. But the big thing that was going on in that show that was, you know, sort of hanging everybody up was this whole issue of consent and what constitutes consent and that sort of thing. So, I mean, in your view, I mean, what role does consent play?
In what context?
Well, just with respect to sexual assault and rape, and in any definition of either rape or sexual assault that you want to, however you want to call it or parse those terms.
According to the Criminal Code of Canada, consent is defined as voluntary agreement. And anything that is not voluntary agreement is a form of sexual assault of one level or another. My personal view is, why would you ever want to do something with somebody who doesn't want to do it with you?
Well, I mean, some people obviously enjoy that.
Yeah.
Regrettably.
And that's why we have laws. Laws are not for, you know, there's a medium, there's a bell curve in the human population of extremely evil to utterly angelic. Most of us are somewhere around the curve here. Laws are made primarily for this end of the spectrum. We know that there will always be bad people doing bad things. That's just the way the world is. Don't like it, but that's the way it is. And that's why we have laws. And that's one of the reasons why I sort of take it as a bottom line. I would agree. If you're doing something to somebody, meaning that they're not willfully engaging with you, then it falls under the category of rape. Now, the question is, what is the marker between normal activity, assault, sexual assault? These things are already defined in the criminal code. So that's why I like to use it, because it just strips ambiguity out of a lot of these questions that we ourselves haven't explored. I would consider it a really, really good primer for understanding the whole debate, the whole topic.
Yeah, well, one would hope that people who sort of venture into this subject and advocate a specific course of action would look into the laws in their own jurisdiction and figure out what's meant by rape and sexual assault in their own jurisdiction. But I wonder if we can sort of abstract away from that a little bit. I mean, what you said makes perfect sense. But I wonder if we can sort of lift off of the particulars of jurisdictions and how they define these things a little bit. Right. You said, you know, the laws are meant to take care of people at sort of the naughty end of the spectrum, right. the sort of the pure evil side. Right. Now, what I think is a problem here with rape is that we have all kinds of cases of young men at parties taking advantage of women. Sometimes they slip them roofies, sometimes they just get them drunk, sometimes they're all just drunk together, and they don't just pay a whole lot of attention to how the woman feels, how the girl feels. There's not a lot of empathy involved. They just they just want to get off. They just want to have an opportunity to feel up a girl or something like that. Now, I don't think these people are evil. I think that, in my view, as I see it, these are young men who really are poorly socialized. We haven't gotten to them yet. The concept of consent as being ingredient in all legitimate sex is either absent or is either, well, yeah, I think there's such a thing as illegitimate sex, right? Rape being a case of illegitimate sex.
But I just went back to that American case where the guy used the word legitimate rape.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean anything like that. Yeah, that's oh dear, that could be misconstrued. No, I mean legitimate sex. Yeah, no, we understand each other. So, as I see it, the laws concerning rape have to take into account more than just sort of the really diabolical people who are lurking in the bushes and just preying on women. I think we have a bigger problem. I mean, not to diminish how awful those crimes are, but really those are quite rare in our culture compared to the kinds of sexual assaults that happen all the time on college campuses. And or in nightclubs, and in cars when couples are making out and stuff like that, blind dates, things like that. These are not people who are evil. I think that these are people who have not been sufficiently socialized in understanding that consent has to be an integral part of sex for it to be legitimate sex. So I mean, and of course, if they violate that, then the law has to sort of be brought down on them. But I think that sort of evil intent can't be sort of our overriding consideration when we talk about rape.
I agree.
You agree? Okay. So then, well, what was your feeling about Thunderfoot's video then, where he was challenging this message? Don't teach me how to dress. That is, a woman. Don't teach me a woman how to dress. Or don't tell me how to dress. Teach your boys not to rape. How do you feel about that message? Do you think that that's somehow misguided or inappropriate or anything like that?
I think that if you come from the perspective of a victim, that is one who is done onto, that from that perspective, well, of course, that's the way it works. Problem is, it's not the only perspective. Let's reverse the roles for a moment. Let us take an example where, for one thing, I wish I had the numbers here, but statistically, more men are raped than women are raped, especially violently raped or sexually assaulted. And we are also more prone to violence on the street than women are. So let's take a
when you talk about forcible rape of men, though, and you say that more men are forcibly raped, you are talking about prison rape for the most part, right?
Including prison rape, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that would be the majority of those cases.
I'm sorry?
That would be the majority of those cases, would it not?
Don't know.
Okay. Not that it matters. I mean, rape is rape, and it doesn't matter if it happens behind bars. It's in fact.
Actually, I'm pretty sure it is the majority of the cases where men are forcibly raped are prison rapes.
I would imagine so.
So let's reverse the roles and let's take a situation where men has an equal chance of being raped as women typically believe that they have, and give him the message: don't tell me what to do to protect myself from rape. Tell Bubba in the cell next to me not to rape me. I don't know about you, but I want to know how to avoid it. If I'm in that situation, yeah, I will not take offense. Some guy comes up to me and says, listen, here's what you can do to prevent yourself from being grabbed and dragged into the laundry room. I want to know these things. So when I apply this to myself, I take no offense at being told, here are steps you can take to protect yourself. I don't see why it would be any different for women, because we are, after all, equal, are we not? Equal in rights, equal in responsibilities.
Yeah. I think that the reason why women get so freaked out by a message like that is because we really are afraid of getting taken back to the bad old days where women were blamed for what they wore and where they were. And these bad old days are not really that long ago. I mean, I remember them. Many women still remember them. being in a bar, in the wrong bar alone, was an excuse to get blamed for your own rape.
Right.
Being drunk, whatever. All of these things were reasons why women got blamed for their own rape. Now, it doesn't happen anymore. But as soon as we hear, well, maybe it does a little bit, but it doesn't happen as much in our culture. Certainly, it happens very rarely in our culture. But every time we hear that that we have some responsibility, even if it's just a responsibility to ourselves to watch what we do. We worry that if we do those things, if we start paying attention and saying, oh, okay, well, maybe I should watch how I dress, or maybe I should watch where I walk, that the next thing that will happen is people will start thinking, well, you weren't taking care of yourself, therefore you have some culpability in your own rape. Now, that is not what Thunderfoot was saying. I'm sorry?
Am I correct in understanding that, I'm trying to rephrase what you're saying, is people object to, what people are afraid of is victim blaming. The reason people get flipped out is because they don't want the average normal human being who happens to be female to be blamed for something that occurred to them. I can understand that. Now, the clarification we need to make at this point then is, was that the intent of Thunderfoot's video?
No, it obviously wasn't.
No, I don't think so either.
So, we agree.
Yeah, I wonder if I could interject here.
Yes.
I just want to sort of expound on Ilana's point, that's the elephant in the room. In feminist discourse, anytime someone is heard to say, well, I mean, as a consequence of feminist discourse is what I mean. As a consequence of feminist discourse, whenever we hear someone recommending a course of action for women to avoid rape, it really does harken back to those bad old days where women were put on the stand and told, why were you dressed that way? What were you doing there? Why weren't you with a male companion? And what's this I hear that you sleep with different men? All of these things were not just. It wasn't just blaming the victim. It was much worse than that. These were things that were said and done by defense attorneys to mitigate the culpability of the rapist, and that's what women, I think, are rightly terrified about. Like this, if we go back to those days, then people are going to walk, or they're going to have shorter sentences. And we don't have to go there, okay? But the only way that we're not going to go there is to be vigilant, right? And so that I'm trying to present their case, right?
Yes.
So their brief, as I understand it, is if we set down this course, right, it's a slippery slope right back into the bad old days, and we can go back to the dark ages. That can happen. We really can reverse moral progress that we've made, and I think it constitutes moral progress in this respect. I'm sorry?
Is there fear, you are saying? What you're saying now?
Yes, that is their fear. Yeah. Now, if I could sort of argue against myself.
Please do.
Okay. Sure. No one else is arguing with me. I better argue with myself. There is... the reason I think people assume that there's this thing called victim blaming going on is because ordinarily, in certain ordinary parlance, we don't take apart or tease apart certain things that are ingredients in moral responsibility and accountability. They're related concepts that get all mashed together under the heading of blame or responsibility. Normally, whoever is causally, physically responsible for an action, a misdeed, and the person who is considered morally responsible and the person who's held accountable are all the same person. If I throw a rock through your window, I'm causally responsible. I'm the one that threw the rock. I'm morally responsible because I did it deliberately. I knew what I was doing, and I understood the consequences of my actions, and I did it anyway. So I'm causally responsible. I'm morally responsible, and so I'm an adult and a free agent, not operating under coercion. So I am to be held accountable. I am liable. for the action. But there are all kinds of circumstances where we tease these things apart, especially when there are crimes that involve two people, where one person is literally victimizing another person or perhaps exploiting some circumstance of the other person. Let me give you an example, had nothing to do with rape or sexual assault, that illustrates how we tease apart these different senses of responsibility and blame. Let's say that I'm at a party at a friend's house. It's a dinner party. I have my infant child with me. I'm holding my child in my arms, or my child on the ground. Doesn't matter. Let's say I'm holding my child in my arms, and he's got a teddy bear, and he's sort of swinging it around, and I'm just talking to friends, and and quite accidentally, my 2-year-old or my 1-year-old lets go of the teddy bear. It goes flying and knocks over a vase, a very expensive vase. It's destroyed. Now, who is causally responsible? Well, obviously, the infant is causally responsible. I didn't do anything about it. But is the kid morally responsible? Well, no. First of all, it was unintentional, and secondly, kids are, not very coordinated, and it wasn't a deliberate action, and even if it was a deliberate action and the kid was aiming at the vase, we wouldn't hold the kid morally responsible because the kid doesn't understand the consequences of its actions. So here's a case where you can divorce moral responsibility from causal responsibility. The child is causally responsible but not morally responsible. Well, then who's accountable? Well, not the child. Who's me? I'm the parent. I'm going to have to pay for the vase. It's my kid. I am liable. I'm accountable for the actions of my child, even though I am not morally responsible for the action. I didn't perform the action, and I'm not causally responsible. I didn't undertake the action.
Right.
But I'm still accountable. So we tease these things apart. Now, in a case of something like a rape, and someone recommending, as Thunderfoot was doing. So here I'm coming to Thunderfoot's defense, is where I'm going with this. When he recommends that women take into account certain factors such as habit of dress and where they're going, posture, things like that, these are things that are going to mitigate.
Which is a big one he used.
What's that?
Body language was another one that he used.
Yeah, that's what I meant by sort of composure and comportment, body language, and sort of sending out a strong signal, not trying to signal that you're an easy victim or something like that. Now these are things that are not going to make a huge difference, but they could make some difference. They could minimize the risk. And my understanding is there's actually some studies that bear this out. I've actually read some of them years and years ago in a book on the subject that looked into these things in detail. But they're not going to very greatly reduce the number of women who are raped, but they'll reduce the risk somewhat, especially in certain circumstances, if you know what to look for and what to do and what to avoid. And there, what I think is happening is he's recommending that a woman take into account or be cognizant of the causal factors, the causal determinants of rape that she can control. I mean, most of these causal factors are utterly out of any woman's control. They're in the hands of the rapist. But there might be some things that they could do. But just because you accept that there is causal responsibility does not mean that you take on the moral responsibility and that you therefore have an obligation to dress a certain way, to act a certain way, to only go certain places. That's not what's being recommended. If I understood Thunderfoot correctly, he was not saying that women had to do these things. I think he even qualified and said, no, I'm not saying that women have to do these things.
That's correct. He was not giving rules, as some had insisted, but merely factual, real-life guidelines.
Yeah, there were at least two people on the panel.
Edge.
Yeah, there were at least two people on the panel who were insisting that he was laying down rules and guidelines that women had to abide by, and that if somehow they were not doing that, that they were somehow morally responsible, or that this would mitigate the culpability of the rapist. And I think that if you sort of can disentangle those concepts of accountability and two different kinds of responsibility, causal and moral, then it's a little easier to see that, well, look, that's exactly what we've encoded in law. It used to be in law that these things were kind of muddled up, but we've disentangled those things. And we have feminists to thank for that, I would insist, that it was a hard-fought battle, very long, very hard-fought battle to get courts to understand that, no, you shouldn't be bringing these factors like how a woman was dressed and her sexual history and whether she was alone and what she was doing, because they are irrelevant. And so they shouldn't be brought up at all, and if they're brought up at all, they should not they should not matter. But because people are going to get confused and muddle these things together, best not to bring them up at all in court. And so you're not supposed to bring up certain topics or certain factors in court about the woman's actions and comportment and sexual history and stuff like that, because they understand that jurors are just going to mash all of these things together.
Yes.
And then you have, hence the problem. But it's not just jurors that have that, it's all of us. We all have a tendency to mash all these things together. And consequently, when we hear someone recommend, well, you know, maybe you should take into account certain factors like, you know, things like attractiveness make a difference. You know, things like how you dress, where you go, whether you're alone, this body language and stuff like that. People assume that you're mitigating the, you're taking on moral responsibility and thus mitigating the culpability of the actual perpetrator, when that's not the case.
If I were looking for some sort of solution, which typically I am, I can see the value of both sides. On one hand, you have people who do not want to deal with not only a sexual assault, but being imputed a moral culpability for it. But you can't just say, I'll do nothing, it's all up to the other. If you were to take the two messages side by side, say, socialize individuals to know what the boundaries with another individual is, and if you were at the same time to say to both parties, here's what you can do to avoid being a perpetrator of these sort of actions. If you combine those two, you got a fine message. I think part of the issue that's happening is both of these valid viewpoints, or potentially valid viewpoints, are being kept separate and thus left on their own and seen through a narrow lens can be so easily decontextualized to become believed nonsense and perceived nonsense. But when you put the two together, here's what you can do to take care of yourself, and here's what you can do to not harm other people, I think that's a good solution, or it's at least it's a good starting message. What do you think?
Well, I think we need to hear both messages, but I think one message has to be louder than the other. And I think the message that has to be louder than the other is, guys, stop raping, and you need to understand what constitutes rape, because I think so much of the sexual assault that goes on is a consequence of especially young men being much lower in empathy than women of the same age, and not understanding or appreciating what constitutes rape. Let me give you an example. We had this case, I can't remember the name of the town. It was in Ohio, I believe. A girl was sexually assaulted. She was drunk at a party. She was taken someplace else. She was sexually assaulted. They took photos of it.
Yes, I remember the incident. I don't remember the name of the city, but the town. But I know which incident you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it happened in the States, so I'm sort of not quite so up on these things. And but I mean, when I read about it at the time, what struck me was, and shortly thereafter, was that these boys were taking pictures of this thing, and this is, you know, you can just imagine, right? If it had been their sister, they wouldn't have done it, right? Okay. But they were taking pictures and text messaging and talking about it, and then other kids were doing the same thing and passing it around, and then this poor girl ends up being victimized and slut shamed for you know, having suffered the indignity of having been fingered by these boys and photographed half naked. You know, right. I mean, this is, you know, pretty horrible. Now, what I think is going on there, the fact that they were sort of doing this in semi-public in front of each other, taking pictures of it, bragging about it in real time, and then after the fact, and then only later trying to cover it up and realizing, uh-oh, I think we crossed some lines here. This is going the wrong way. It shows you that a lot of people just don't know what rape is. They don't understand that this is not innocent play, that this is a gag. I mean, as far as they were concerned, this was just a little bit naughtier than painting a mustache on your drunk buddy's face. I mean, that seems to be the state of mind that they were in when they were doing this horrible thing to this girl.
Sure.
And then it wasn't just them. You had a whole town, it seemed, that wanted to treat it as if someone had painted a mustache on her while she slept.
Well, there's a couple things I'd like to point out.
Okay.
First of all, you're saying that the message should be primarily males don't do this.
Well, to avoid this problem, to avoid this pattern, yes, yeah.
Okay, and you're saying that's the most important part.
Yeah, yeah.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
Because we did have a woman who was passed out drunk, didn't we? Now, this does not excuse the behavior of the males. What I'm saying in terms of the message, two parts came into confluence and created an intensely negative result. Why are you putting the weight just on?
Okay. Oh, wait. If I could just step in here, there's a reason why the weight should be on the guys here, because they were the ones that were morally responsible. Can you hear me? Someone's frozen. Okay.
I can hear you.
The boys were the morally responsible one. The girl was only responsible for getting drunk, okay? But that's not a responsibility in her rape, okay? Well, as Ozzy was saying before, it's a causal responsibility. But in an ideal world, a woman should be able to get passed out drunk wherever she wants. But a guy should never be able to do what those boys did to her. So there's a real difference between those two things. Do you understand? Do you agree with that?
I think Francis is frozen.
Yeah, he was frozen on my screen too.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Francis, turn off your camera. That sometimes helps a little bit. And if that doesn't work, you may have to close out of the Hangout and come back in.
I'm not hearing him at all.
No, I think we lost him. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. All right. Well, let me fill the air with words. Did you agree with what I said, by the way? Yeah, I did. I don't think Francis would disagree that with what you were saying. Oh, there he is. He's back. You're back.
Francis, can you hear us? Oh, he's muted.
Oh, you're muted. Hang on.
No, I think he has to unmute himself, maybe.
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself, Francis. Just go up to the top of your screen.
He's frozen again.
Oh, I think you're frozen again. Darn. Okay. That's unfortunate. All right. Well, I don't want to speak for him, but my hunch is that he wouldn't disagree with what you said with respect to the distinction between moral and causal responsibility. That the girl is bearing the causal responsibility, the boys are bearing the moral responsibility. But the thing is, you know, I mean, if it's your daughter, what are you going to tell your daughter? You're not going to tell your daughter, make sure you hang out with guys who know not to rape, right? Who understand what consent is, and have enough empathy that they can realize when they're doing something that's way over the line, right? What you want to advise your daughters is what is within their control and that they can do something about, like don't get hammered. But of course, when you're a young person, it's very easy to get hammered. I can remember having some drinking experience in college and going to a party and being fed little shots of vodka jello shots, little vodka shots with jello. They tasted so good. And I shot back a few, and all that gelatin dissolved all at once, and I went from stone cold sober to hammered in about 5 minutes, and that can happen. So the big lesson here, of course, is you don't forsake your civil liberties just because you did something unwise. It is unwise to go to a party and get hammered. It's unwise to get into a car with a total stranger and you know, stuff like that. but you don't forsake your civil liberties. You know, it's unwise to go hitchhiking, but you don't have it coming to you if you get beat up and mugged and robbed because you got into a car with someone when it was inadvisable to do so. So I think we all understand that. So I think he would agree with that. But I think what he was, well, I don't know. I better stop here because I don't want to speak for him. Oh, good. He's left the hangout, and he must be trying to get back in. There he is.
Hello?
Hi. Okay.
We're back!
Welcome back. Okay. Well, I was making a lot of noise while you were gone, trying to fill the air with words. But Francis, if that happens again, just try turning off your camera. Sometimes that seems to do the trick. It's worked for me in the past.
Uh-oh, I think...
Oh, dear. That really stinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I'm curious, Ilana, what your thoughts were when I was describing that situation, that the rape of that high school student in the States, in Ohio, at that party. What were your thoughts on that? Like, did you agree with what I was saying there? Did you take a different view?
What specifically are you referring to? I might have been...
Oh, you were looking at the comments there.
I might have been, yeah.
Yeah, that case at Steubenville, I think it was Steubenville, Ohio, is the case of that girl, that high school girl who went to a party, got very, very drunk. She got taken by some boys to another party in a car, and where she was half undressed and felt up. And
no, I know the case. Yeah. What was your point, though?
Well, my point there was that the boys, for this in reading about this and how they did it semi-publicly and took pictures and bragged about it both during when they were doing it and immediately following, seems to me to suggest that they didn't think it was anything like rape. They just didn't think that they were raping this girl. That for them this was just a really bad prank. You know, they might have thought it was a cruel prank, but nothing more than that, right? And so the whole message of teach your boys not to rape is not just tell boys don't rape, because that would be an empty message. Everyone knows don't rape. Those boys would have told you, yeah, of course rape is wrong, but they clearly didn't understand what constituted rape and that what they were doing constituted rape, and it wasn't pickled into them so deeply and so well rehearsed in them and so ingrained in them that even when drunk, they could apprehend that this was way over the line, that this was wrong, that this would constitute rape, that it would be a rape.
I do agree with you there. I don't think they thought they were raping that girl, or I think that if they had thought they were raping that girl, they wouldn't have taken the pictures and bragged about it the way they did. Of course, that doesn't remove any of the culpability they have, and I don't think you're suggesting that for a minute. Yeah, no, we actually discussed this a few weeks ago. I think that it's very important to teach boys not to rape because of exactly this kind of thing. I don't think boys sometimes have a proper understanding of what's going way over the line. And like you said, they thought rape was something different.
Yeah. Well, there was something else in Thunderfoot's video. It might have been in the follow-up video. He did a slightly shorter video, I think, afterwards, or maybe it was about the same duration. I thought it was a little shorter. A kind of follow-up to that initial video. And I think he was, that might be where I was thinking of a pamphlet, where he was sort of picking on a pamphlet and objecting to what it said there. And that was a pamphlet that was being given out to victims of rape. It was a kind of thing that a rape crisis center would give to a rape victim.
Yeah,
and he was objecting to that. I remember you had thoughts on that.
You're back on.
Oh,
welcome back,
there.
Francis.
Francis, if you turn your camera off, you might have a less chance of falling out that way. Sometimes the camera is using up a lot of bandwidth and can cause problems.
Sure. I just rebooted my router, so hopefully that'll solve the problem.
Oh, okay, great.
So unfortunately, I was cut off at a very unfortunate point. But do you want to catch me up, or where are we at right now, or do we start back there?
No, we can start back there.
Yeah. Just remind us where we left off.
We were talking about, you were saying that the most important part of the message, of the two messages, one was the one found on the sign, the other was Thunderfoot's point of view. I was saying we should combine them. You were saying that the emphasis should be placed on teach men not to rape. And the point that we brought up the point of those high school students, and where I left off was the point where I said, well, look, yes, on one hand, these guys did something they really should not have done. On the other hand, this woman also, to support the what is read on the signs, yes, teach these boys not to do these things. I say teach people not to do these things to other people. But at the same time, to support Thunderfoot's thing, had she not gotten wasted, even though she had no agency in the commission of the assault upon her, had she not gotten hammered drunk, this is an example of where Thunderfoot's message would hold valid, that had she not placed herself in that position, even though the agency for what happened to her, the assault upon her, is not hers morally or causally, she might have had the opportunity to not have this occur by following the guidelines.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're not suggesting in any way that it should mitigate what their punishment would be or anything like. Okay, okay, good. I wasn't sure what. Okay.
However, that having been said, what I insist upon is that both men and women, without discrepancy, should have equal rights, but equal responsibility at all time. Responsibility for your life. If you make stupid choices, you unfortunately will reap stupid results. I'm not saying that she has either causal or moral agency in this case, but I'm saying that if she had made better choices, these idiots would not have had the opportunity to act like idiots. So
I would disagree with one tiny point. I would say that if she got dressed and that proved to be a permissive condition for her to be raped.
I'm sorry, if she got dressed?
I said if she got drunk, then she's. You
said dressed.
No, dressed. If she got drunk, thank you. If she got drunk, then of course she's causally responsible for producing what's called a permissive condition, a condition that makes it possible for somebody else to take advantage of you, like like leaving your car doors unlocked, for instance, or leaving your house door unlocked is a permissive condition. It has nothing to do with
a lot of money in a poor community is a permissive condition.
Yeah, it's a permissive condition for getting mugged. Yeah, okay. But you don't forsake your civil liberties, and no one's going to say, well, they get off with a milder sentence or no conviction at all for having mugged you because you were unwise enough to flash money around. But I'm curious about something, because you're taking me to task on what?
I'm not taking anyone to task, but continue.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you're challenging me on my saying that the emphasis needs to be on the boys not raping, and I see your point. That wait a minute. I mean, if women can rape men, even if it's less frequent or more frequent or whatever the frequency happens to be, whatever the relative frequencies are, what we should be saying is teach people not to rape. But the people who are making these signs and agitating for this, now it's possible. I'm confident. I'm absolutely positive that they're operating under a false paradigm that you are describing, where they associate one gender with victimhood and one gender with
that's correct.
Perpetrators. But at least for the purposes of that type of crime, right? That direction of crime, male to female crime, male aggression on female victims. Surely it makes sense to explain, to tell people don't rape, and as I was saying when you were off air, that telling boys don't rape is meaningless. The boys in the Steubenville rape case didn't
Steubenville,
think they were. Yeah, it came to me later. The the boys in the Steubenville rape case, Ilana and I both agreed that they didn't think that they were raping, which is exactly how we all failed them, and why that girl was raped. Those little bastards just thought it was a little more than a prank. And so you have to teach people what constitutes rape. But now I'd like to know what in the other direction now. If we were to balance this out and make this sort of gender equitable so that it was sort of more egalitarian, so that there wasn't the assumption that males are perpetrators and females are victims, what would the message say on that sign? Like, or not, never mind what it would say, because it would just say, don't teach your kids to rape. But what would we teach girls differently than to teach them not to rape? I know what we teach boys about rape, but what do we teach girls about, how not to become rapists? I mean, that's less clear to me.
The same sort of thing. Here's an example. The pop culture reference. Consider what is her name? Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus twerking against the other male singer. Now, technically, she's rubbing her genitals against his genitals. Now, if that were a male doing it to a female, would the response have been the same?
Definitely not. No. I mean, having been on some dance floors as an adolescent male, I would have been only too happy if women rubbed up against me.
Sure.
But that's just to say that there's a huge difference in how men and women view sex and physical contact. I mean,
Is that so?
Well, yeah. I mean, just let me give you a trivial example. If you're in a crowded bar, just do this experiment. Go to a bar at a crowded nightclub and do this, or watch it from the sidelines, and you'll see, like, in a crowded bar where people are trying to squeeze past each other to get from the dance floor to the bar or something, or the restroom.
From point A to point B.
When people are sort of have to pass by each other, men will tend, when they're passing by a woman, to turn and face her, completely non-consciously. I've done it. I caught myself doing it when I discovered that this was a common phenomenon. Whereas women will tend to turn and roll away from a man. They'll turn their backs to a guy, right? And I mean, this is practically universal. It's incredible. I mean, once you're attuned to this, and you go to a nightclub and you watch this, and you watch people squeezing by, or in a crowded restaurant or on a crowded subway or bus, watch what happens when people have to squeeze by each other. Women turn away. Men tend to turn into women.
Men turn into women? Really?
Yeah, I meant.
I understand.
Perhaps not quite so literally. Men and women have completely different attitudes about unsolicited physical contact with the opposite sex. Men tend to be entirely happy when it happens most of the time. Not to say that they're always happy. Once had a very uncomfortable night sharing a bed with a girl at a party when we were just crashing for the night because the buses had stopped running and there was some unwanted attention towards me, and it was a really horrible, sleepless night. Had I been doing it to her, I think it would have been perceived much, much, much less. Well, I mean, I thought it was just uncomfortable and kind of inconsiderate, and if I had done the same thing to her, I think it would have been, instantly construed as a species of sexual assault. It didn't occur to me that I was being sexually assaulted, but under your definition, I was being sexually assaulted.
Yes. And when in the beginning, when I was all uptight and nervous and trying to sound smooth and suave, it's one of the things that I alluded to. We have a double standard, but we don't notice it. I noticed this ever since I was a kid. People say we're equal. Why are we not being treated equal? You've given me a perfect example. She was coming on to you. You didn't want her to come on to you, and things happened that you have not divulged, nor will I delve into. If she
nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened.
Okay, but if she would have considered it this, why would the same rules not apply to you?
No, it's a very fair point. It's a very fair point. And I've got to say, in my whole life, until this minute, it never occurred to me that under some definitions of sexual assault, I was sexually assaulted. I mean, you know, I was being groped and hugged and, you know, squeezed and spooned in bed against my will, despite very obvious signals of non-interest. You know, short of screaming no,
yeah,
I didn't actually say no, but you had to be pretty obtuse not to realize that this was unwanted attention.
yes.
But how about that? I've been sexually assaulted. Well, you taught me something.
Well, you failed to say no, though.
I did fail to say no.
You should have said no.
But I did signal no in 100 different ways.
Now that you can view this from your point of view, ask yourself questions about consent. Were you consenting? Were you not? Did you just let it happen and say nothing? How many times do you think this happens to women? Should you have spoken out? Now, from this point of view, I want you to review all of your arguments. Because now what you're finally doing is, forgive me, I don't know how to express this, and this is just going to come out wrong.
Just go with the first approximation, and we can refine it.
You're finally showing empathy. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes. You've always put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Now you're putting yourself in your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never heard that. It's kind of interesting.
First person point of view is me to you. Second person point of view is you to me. Third person is, you know, Liana watching us, sort of thing. Empathy is not necessarily compassion. It is simply being able to see things from the second point of view. And what our society habitually fails to do for men is to see things from a man's point of view. Men are viewed as actors, as agents, as perpetrators. Women are viewed as exactly the inverse, and nobody takes the time to turn around and look at things from men's point of view and go, well, in this very same thing, if we reverse the roles, what happens?
Well, can I say something here, though?
Yes.
I mean, you know, what is your opinion of what a feminist would say about what happened to me? And I have a lot more to say about what happened to me and how I think it should be construed. But what do you think a feminist would be inclined to say? I mean, obviously, not all feminists would all say the same thing. It's not a monolith. But what is your view of what most feminists would be inclined to think? Because I'm inclined to think that most feminists would say, yeah, you were sexually assaulted, man.
This is kind of touchy because a feminist, now this goes back to the conversation where Aaron Ross said, the definition of a feminist is, and where when we look it up, if you'll give me just a moment here, I'll do a quickie search for it, and I will choose my favorite search engine and type in define feminism.
Sure, you go ahead and do that. I'll sort of be able to brief our viewers on what happened on the Magic Sandwich Show at that point.
Yeah.
Wait, I just want to say something. I don't actually think you were sexually assaulted.
No, neither do I.
Oh, okay.
I was saying, wow, how about that?
I mean, if that's considered sexual assault, then you know, most women are sexually assaulted 1,000 times because you know, I mean, that's really nothing.
It is totally nothing. I as miserable as I was that evening, that night, I'm almost tempted to tell the story, but I won't. Yeah, I certainly didn't consider myself a sexual assault victim.
I mean, that's it. You were uncomfortable, and it shouldn't have happened, and she shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
That would be exactly the same thing that I would say to any guy who did that to a woman. But I mean, you got spooned, right?
More than that. But you know, like I was being hugged and kissed, and so, you know, trying to neck with me, and you know, like I was literally fending her off,
So you were
non-verbal
consent, non-consent.
Well, yeah, there was non-verbal non-consent. I was very clearly, I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I mean,
How many times have you heard women use that phrase? I didn't want to hurt his feelings.
Well, I'm sure that happens all the time. But my feeling is, and I think Ilana is actually on my side on this, that when this happens to a man, that isn't sexual assault.
Why not?
It's damned inconsiderate and rude. But I
Yes.
don't think it's the. But I would hold women to the same standard. I'd say, look, if some guy does that to you, he's being an absolutely inconsiderate ass. Okay, and he shouldn't do it. But if you don't actually have the nerve to say, look, cut it out, stop it, okay, enough, which I simply lacked the nerve to say it. I didn't want to
Yeah,
say it
you
here.
have to have the nerve to say that. You have to have the nerve to turn around and say fuck off and keep your hands to yourself. And only
And
after that.
Okay, language. We're trying to
Sorry.
keep this family friendly.
are we? Uh-oh.
Well, as much as possible.
Okay. And what I would add to that is this brings in the notion of consent. Now we're talking about consent. According to the Criminal Code of Canada, consent is voluntary agreement. To feminists, and I use this term broadly, and I will speak specifically of gender feminists, not equity feminists. We can talk about that later if you want. But a gender feminist will usually find the most uncharitable definition when applied to men and the most charitable definition when applied to women.
Can we, I mean, I'm familiar with the distinction between gender feminism and equity feminism.
You want me to discuss
but yeah, if you could just say something like,
all right.
Equity, I mean, people are going to understand, I think, what equity feminism means.
Let me jump in here.
But gender feminism won't be so clear.
Okay, let me jump in here, and this is also in response to Aaron Raw's definition, where he said that, and I'm paraphrasing because it was a 6-hour show. Basically, it's a belief in social, political, and economic equality for the sexes. That's the definition of feminism. End period, according to Aaron Raw, if I'm accurately reflecting what it is that I understood him to mean. My understanding of it is found in the very first paragraph on the Wikipedia definition. It's feminism is a collection of movements and ideologies. It's a collection of movements and ideologies aimed at defining, establishing, and defending equal political, economics, and social rights for women. That's another definition. That's a counter definition to Aaron Raw's.
Well, his definition was sort of didn't make specific mention of the interests of women or women. It was, the way he defined it was sort of negatively. He said that he started with a disanalogy. He said, look, that we don't have a word in English for a non-racist. Okay.
Right.
But we do have a word for non-sexist, and that word is feminist. So a feminist is a non-sexist, and if you're sexist, you're presumably not feminist. That he presented it as a dichotomy, and he qualified that a little later in response to me sort of pushing back on that. I have plenty to say about what he was saying there, but
so let me sort of continue on with the train of thought here.
Mm-hmm.
The distinction between gender feminist and equity feminist, it's a term used by Christina Hoff Sommers, who herself, she claims to be a feminist.
Can I interrupt? There's a wonderful book by Christina Hoff Sommers for those who are interested in this subject of gender feminism and equity feminism called Who Stole Feminism?
That's right. And that's where she makes a distinction. And the distinction is this. An equity feminist is somebody who, as I believe what Aaron Raw would refer to as both sides being equals. Both sides have equal rights. I always like to add equal rights and responsibilities. That's such an important part. A gender feminist, on the other hand, is a feminist who is purely about the promotion of women's benefit, regardless of men's benefit. So it's not, equity is equal, gender focuses on empowering, in quotes, women. That's my understanding of it. Would you like to add or append, or?
No, I think that's pretty much how Christina Hoff Sommers splits it. That basically that you have to think of equity feminists as advocating for strict equality between the sexes and equality of opportunity, not necessarily equality of result.
Yes.
Whereas a gender feminist is more concerned with equality of result, but not necessarily strict equality. It's more, it's understood as that those parts of the feminist movement that are concerned with the interests of women and advancing the interests of women, and if they end up going,
to the detriment of men, just
yeah, that's right, yeah. So
okay,
that would be, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't say it better than you, so.
So now, but it doesn't matter. We got the message across. So now, when you ask me the question, what would a feminist say? There's at least a dozen variants on feminism, ranging from ecofeminism to sex-positive feminism to radical feminism to lesbian feminism. There's so many varieties. It's like asking, what would a Christian say? Well, it depends on their variant. But in my case, I'll use gender feminists, which you could roughly equate also to radical feminists. And in this term, radical, from their point of view, means from the root, from the bottom up. My experience, the reason I'm no longer a feminist, because I was bullied into being a feminist for a little while, the reason I'm no longer is because I've learned to make the distinction between rhetoric and action. And in the case of gender feminists, they will always apply the most charitable definitions that serves their purpose to themselves and the most uncharitable definitions as applies to anybody that they consider to be an opponent.
Well, can you give an example of that? Because that's gonna sound, pretty sweeping.
Well, I know, but you asked a very sweeping question, and
No, I did. But if you could just flesh it out a little bit, and I know I'm putting you on the spot to come up with something.
An example is an equity feminist or an egalitarian would say, hey, what happened to you that evening, whatever you would claim for one side must equally apply to the other side. If somebody would have said this is sexual assault, then if it was done from a woman to a man, it is equally sexual assault. Whereas a gender feminist or a radical feminist might say, well, you're a guy, so it's different. Special pleadings. Another issue that I have is that one of the reasons I don't like the word rape, and I prefer to use the legal term of sexual assault, is because rape becomes always in finer and finer and finer gradients. First rape was what we'd call level 3, violent assault. He beat the heck out of her, and she's a mess and she's destroyed for life. Level 2 is he just forced her to do something that she didn't want to do while holding a knife to her throat. Level 1 is he just took what he wanted. Maybe date rape would be an example. He took what he wanted without concern for her feelings. But then what I believe that a gender feminist or a radical feminist does is they keep splitting it to finer and finer and finer gradations until you get to the point, well, he looked at me funny, that's rape. So what they do is they just keep broadening and broadening and broadening the definition of the word rape until anything breathing the wrong way becomes rape.
Yeah,
well, but how does getting rid of the word rape save that? I mean, they'll just, if that's what they want to do, they'll just do it with another term. They'll do it with sexual assault.
Because in law, the term sexual assault has very specific meanings. Looking at somebody is not rape. Looking at somebody is not sexual assault. There's a definition for what assault is, and that carries into, it's like all sets and subsets, but there's a definition of assault. There's a definition of sexual assault, which is a kind of assault. Looking at somebody is not an assault. There's no physical contact.
Yeah, but most people don't consider looking at somebody to be a rape either. I mean,
but the question was, what would a gender feminist say in this case?
Just let me come to Frances's rescue here. I mean, there are some feminists who are extremely radical in their views. I mean, there are some. I mean, Andrea Dworkin comes to mind, said something to the effect of that any male-female sex, any penile vaginal intercourse is by definition rape. You know, so I mean, so that, and she didn't say that looking was a rape, but I mean, you know, even under some feminist definitions of rape, you know, two people deeply in love and mutually consenting can't have sex if they're of the opposite sex without the man raping the woman. Now, but notwithstanding that kind of craziness, which most feminists would want to push away from themselves with both hands because it's an embarrassment to them.
Yes.
I think that you have a point that yes, there is a strong strain within what we would call gender feminists to broaden the understanding of what constitutes rape or sexual assault, so that it's very hard not to accidentally sexually assault somebody.
Exactly.
But can we go back a little bit to the case? I mean, I don't want to dwell on my experience, but it seemed to. I noticed in the comment that a friend of mine seemed to be, I think, apoplectic about the fact that I don't think that I was sexually assaulted in the example that I gave. And let me flesh out what happened. I was at a party. I was a single man in my 20s, and there was a young woman there who was interested in me. I was not interested in her, and we ended up spending the night at this this party. Now, this party, as it turns out, had been a pretext. She had been interested in me, had been in cahoots with the hostess of the party.
Sure.
All the other people who were supposed to show up didn't show up. This was a put-up job. This was a set-up job. They were matchmaking. They were trying to match me up with this girl. Everyone was trying to be very nice about it. It became clear to me halfway through the evening that this is what was going on. And I'd had enough to drink, and the buses had stopped running, that I had to spend the night there. And then I thought, oh, well, we're all just going to crash. I thought, you know, I'd crash on a couch or something like that. But no, we're directed upstairs, and, oh, here, you can sleep in my parents' bedroom. You know, it's a big queen-size bed, or king-size bed. Here you go. And so the other couple were going to sleep in their bedroom, and I was going to have to share this bed with this girl. And, you know, I stupidly went along with that. Thinking that I'll just, you know, I'll sleep in my underwear and I'll stick to my side of the bed. She'll stick to her side of the bed. Well, we ended up sort of doing this thing where we sort of rolled back and forth, where I would roll away and I would sort of try to push her away until I was practically off the bed, and then she would sort of give up and roll away, and then I would roll back into the center of the bed or to, like, my side of the bed, and then it kept happening, and then there was a lot of pawing and a lot of kissing me and fondling me and trying to coax me, and a lot of very sort of sweet nothings being whispered at me. It was all extremely flattering. Right. This is not the kind of thing that had ever happened to me before. But I was really miserable because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I had no interest in the woman. Right. Now, I don't think I was sexually assaulted.
Right.
I just think she was incredibly sexually aggressive. But I didn't feel at any point, I never thought for a moment that I couldn't say no and it wouldn't be no. I knew that if I said no, enough, that would be it. I wanted to avoid that horrible thing. Right. I really did. I didn't want to crush her. I didn't want to make her feel bad. And if I had been a little interested in her, but this was perhaps going too fast for me, it wouldn't have been. But I mean, if I had been interested in her and it had been going too fast, I might have felt the same way, that I don't want to say no. I dare not say no. I need to sort of go along with this to the degree that I did. So I don't think I was sexually assaulted. And I have to say, if that happens to a woman, and I'm going to take some heat for this, but I don't think that was sexual assault. If a man does that to a woman, or a woman does it to a woman, or a man does it to a man. And I'm hoping Ilana will come to my rescue here.
Right.
And tell me that you agree, please.
No, I think that you never really said no. You never really told her straight out that you didn't want to have anything to do with her, and until you did that, it wasn't really a sexual assault. She was really pushing it, obviously, but you never told her to stop. You know, and I mean, you know, that kind of things happen to me too. And when you don't tell the person to stop, then you know you've got some responsibility for it. That's all.
Yeah. And I would agree with that, because what you're doing is, always remember, equal rights, equal responsibilities. Human beings on the planet got to deal with what's real. If it
I mean,
applies to
he could have gotten up at any point and left that bed, right?
yes,
He could have said
yeah,
stop. He could have gotten up and left the bed. I mean, yeah, no.
yeah. At the so yes, go on. I just lost my train of thought.
No, I'm
So
sorry, I
far,
cut you off.
no. So far, we're in agreement. I now I don't know about you, Ilana. Ilana, I'm sorry. Do you consider yourself to be a feminist?
No, I don't consider myself to be a feminist, but just I absolutely do believe that women have equal rights and, you know, equal rights to jobs, equal rights in every respect. I just don't like to use the term feminist because I consider it a loaded term. I don't agree with patriarchy theory. I don't agree with rape culture. All of those
Exactly.
things that are loaded in feminism nowadays, I don't want to be associated with it. So no,
That's
I don't
this
call
is
myself a
these are
feminist.
radical feminist concepts. So
Exactly.
you might be, if you had claimed the title feminist, I would have referred to you as an equity feminist. But you claim not to be a feminist at all, so the title doesn't apply. But the point of you're saying both sides should be equal, and I happen to agree with that. Even as a men's rights advocate, or I shouldn't say even, as a men's rights advocate, for me everything is: are we dealing with each other as respectful peers? Regardless. Imagine for a moment that the human race were not a race of sexual mammals, but that we were asexual lizards, and we had blue and green, or sorry, purple and green. Purple and green would be equivalent in all ways. That's what I consider to be. That's what I consider to be egalitarianism. And by the way, 2 points for whoever gets the purple and green reference.
I don't get it. What is it?
That's all right. Somebody in the comments at some point
Is it
now
like
or 10
Dr.
years
Seuss or
from now.
something? Or
I'm sorry?
is it Dr. Seuss or something?
No. Any time from now, from 10 years, somebody's going to get the purple and green lizard reference.
Okay, I don't get it.
That's all right. I'm a geek.
All right, let's try to formulate a question here. Well, let me answer the question that Ilana answered that you put to her about is she a feminist. There was a time, like you, I identified as a feminist. I identified as a feminist as a young man in my early 20s for the same reason that I would identify as someone who believed in the equality of the races as a non-racist.
Sure.
As an egalitarian with respect to the races. I wanted to be an egalitarian with respect to the sexes and the genders. And it just seemed obvious to me. Of course I'm a feminist. And I think that that's how Aaron Ra actually thinks about it. That, look,
I agree.
Look, you don't want to be sexist, do you? It's just that in the course of having read some feminists and coming into contact in courses with feminist studies, that there's just a whole lot more to feminism than its stated ideals.
That's correct.
There is content, not just an objective, not just an end goal, not just an ideal. There is, in fact, content there about what causes gender inequalities that we find, what causes sexual discrimination. The whole patriarchy theory, for instance. There's a whole raft of theories about what you're supposed to do about it. Once you've diagnosed, what the problem is and what's causing it, then of course that suggests certain remedies. Things like affirmative action and things like that. So there was a whole pile of things that I didn't agree about feminism, both in terms of its methods, in terms of its diagnosis of the problem, and so eventually it was the more I came into contact with feminism, the more I realized I actually don't agree with these things. Some of the stuff strikes me as just BS and unsubstantiated, and has the character of an ideology. And the more you object to it or try to object to it, the more your motives are are impugned, your character assassinated, and the assumption that you're operating under false consciousness. That was another term that came out all the time. I mean, I'm sure a lot of feminists would just say that you know, Ilana and I and you are operating under a kind of false consciousness if we think that what happened to me wasn't sexual assault. Now, I don't know if you think that that was sexual assault or not. I don't think I was sexually assaulted, and I don't think if the genders had been reversed, the roles had been reversed in that case, that it would have been sexual assault. It's not to say it wouldn't have been wrong to do it, but I don't think it would be sexual. I don't think it was a crime. In other words, I don't think a crime was committed. It's not that there was no wrongdoing, but it wasn't a crime.
You know, there's a point in time when people have to step away from their ideologies and deal with reality. And one of the realities of the human race is that some of us are clumsy. We're clumsy at various things. And clumsiness is not a crime in itself. You know, the woman who's trying to coax you, we'll use that term. I don't consider that what you experienced to be a crime. Personally, if it occurred to me, it would be annoying, it would be a pain in the butt, it would be distasteful, but I would never consider the next day going, hey, you raped me. I would never do that, because I acknowledge that people can be clumsy sometimes, and bad things happening or less than perfect things happening are just the fact that human beings are different human beings, and that malice is not the primary motive of an individual.
Well, I think that a lot of feminists, those who subscribe to patriarchy theory, wouldn't assume that there's so much malice going on. I mean, some would, you know, but a lot of feminists would just say, no, that a lot of the wrongdoing and the sexual discrimination that goes on, and you know, a lot of the evils of sexism that take place aren't done out of malice. They're done out of a kind of social brainwashing, where we are, you know, we are socially constructed beings. We don't just have a biology. What's that?
I disagree with that, but go on, continue.
Do you disagree with my assessment, or?
No, I agree with your assessment. I disagree with what you are reporting that the feminists would say.
Well, I know some feminists who would say that. I mean, I've had plenty of conversations with feminists, and not recently. I'm thinking primarily when I was in grad school and undergrad, which was quite a ways back now. But I mean, I had a lot of those conversations. And you know, there wasn't that much vilification. I mean, there were times when things would get very spirited, and a group of them would get together, and they would sort of pump each other up, and they would sort of go overboard, and the tendency to demonize and vilify would sort of overtake them, and they would sort of speak about men in very unpleasant terms. But I mean, I've seen that happen on message boards between MRAs, you know, when they get talking, you know, and
Sure.
There's a groupthink that starts, and next thing you know, women are all just bitches, you know. I mean, that's you don't want to sort of characterize an entire movement or sets of movements even by when they sort of get whipped up.
I think that's very fair.
We're having some questions on the MRM.
Sure.
So maybe we could go back to that topic for a bit, and you could
Just out of
describe.
curiosity, yes.
Yeah.
How many people are following this?
I haven't counted.
It says 8 viewers at the bottom of my screen. So we've got eight viewers
Oh,
presently.
no, 8 viewers.
One question that was quite a while ago was, what's the difference between men's rights and women's rights? If you'd like to tackle that, Francis.
In my opinion, rights are literally rights in law. They are permissions typically from society, practically from government, that empower you to not be restricted to do something. That's a right. Men's rights and women's rights, in my opinion, should be utterly equitable, on par. Now, I use the term equitable, not equal, in the sense that there are certain rights that just due to physiology, one or the other sex cannot partake in. But all things being considered, they are equitable. I think they
Like
should
what kind of right are you talking about when you say one sex can't partake in? You mean
Well,
like
for example,
reproductive rights?
a man cannot have the right to have an abortion.
Oh, okay.
It just wouldn't make sense. However, so I believe that both sides should have equitable rights. We should be on par. Now, unfortunately, we're not. And I'll pose a double question here. Or, well, actually, I'll pose a question, which may, for those who are unfamiliar with some of the positions in the men's rights movement, might be a little bit surprised. Can you name a right in law in North America? I'm limiting it to North America. Can you name a right in law that men possess that women do not? Think about that for a moment. I can turn around and say that men have every right that women do, save one: reproductive rights. Men have no reproductive rights whatsoever. One of the big causes of feminism
Wait,
is that,
wait, hang on. You can't mean that men have no reproductive rights. You mean
I mean
men have
exactly
no reproductive rights that a
at
woman
all.
doesn't have also.
Men have no reproductive rights, period.
Well, I mean, I can have kids, and that's my right.
You can have kids. Uh, yes. Okay, sorry. Do we want to get into this, or do we want to?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, the question from the commenter was, you know, how do you see men's rights versus women's rights? If you want to illustrate with examples, that's fine. That's good.
Overall, I would consider that men and women should have the same rights and the same responsibilities where applicable. A man obviously cannot have the right to have an abortion, nor can a woman have the right, for example, to a vasectomy. You know, however, we do have the equivalent right of controlling our fertility through sterilization. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my belief, and to the best of my knowledge, and I think that 99.999% of all men's rights advocates will say that men and women should have equivalent rights in all domains without question.
Okay, so if that's the case, and since you're saying that as far as you're concerned, women have all the same rights that men do, right?
Yes. In law. The same rights in law.
And men have all the same rights that women have, right?
Save for reproductive rights. Men have no reproductive rights. We can reproduce, but okay, we have to get into this.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is, and I think this is probably what the commenter was trying to get at too, is what exactly are men's rights activists activating for, right?
Okay.
I mean, what are they concerned about?
Okay, my particular interest as a men's rights activist is reproductive rights specifically. Men suffer an enormous amount of discrepancies in family court. Once a child is conceived, the reproductive rights start at the moment of conception, not before. Contraception is not a reproductive right. Okay, so conception is the splitting moment. The moment a woman conceives, she has a variety of choices. Choice 1, carry the child to term. Choice 2, do not carry the child to term. Okay? In either case, the man has no say in this. Now, I happen to agree. I think that a man should have no say over what a woman chooses to do with her body. That's her business. It's her body. It's her choice, quite literally. Man has no say in this. So let's say that now it would, in a perfect world, children would be planned and both parties would have long discussions. That's not always the case. So let's say that she does choose to bring the child to term. Okay, so far the man has had no right in this matter. Once a child comes to term, she can choose whether the father is involved in the child's life or not. She can choose to legally abandon the child. She can choose to keep the child. The man has no say in any of these matters, yet he has the obligations. If a woman says, well, you're the father, and you will raise this child, or you will pay to raise this child, it is legally enforced in law that the man must do so. Now, what I personally as an activist am working for is, before reproductive rights, is male contraception. But in a perfect world, imagine that we have male contraception. My next moves would be to work towards legal paternal surrender, which is the equivalent of basically the woman being able to legally abandon the child as she can. The man would have the same right without being burdened with the responsibilities by the state. Further, what I would like to see in law is that when a child is born, the father must be named on the birth certificate, and at that point, if no name is named on the birth certificate, no male is responsible for the upbringing of the child unless he chooses to engage to do so. But let's say a male is named on the birth certificate, that we would have a paternity test done by law. If the father matches, at that point, and he has chosen to accept the child as his own, then at that point he becomes liable for all of the responsibilities. However, if there is no name, if the paternity test does not match, he is not forced by law to support the child if he chooses not to do so. So these are rights in law that I am working towards. Now, I haven't started working towards these rights. I'm still working on the contraception bit. But these are rights in law that I, as an activist, will be working on.
I'm interested. How are you working on the contraceptive bit? And I'm just curious what you mean by that.
Well, currently, women have at the moment about 18 different forms of contraception. Men have approximately 3, including sterilization, the use of condoms, abstinence, and pulling out. Okay, those are the 4 methods of contraception that a man has. Women have approximately 18, and I can't name them all offhand, but I'm sure that if we sat down for 2-3 minutes, thought about it, we could run through the list of them. The male contraceptive that I'm working on bringing is a new product. Well, it's a product that has run in India known as Rysug, and in the United States, the rights have been bought by an organization, a social conscience organization, and they've renamed it Vasagel. What it essentially boils down to is a man goes for a short procedure wherein the vas deferens are filled with a gel that basically destroys sperm. It's a quick half-an-hour procedure, start to finish, from the time you go in to the time you go out, assuming waiting time is about an hour, and it's utterly reversible. The procedure of filling the vas deferens with this gel that destroys the sperm before it comes out lasts for about 10 years, and it's utterly reversible. So I believe that when men can control their fertility, a lot of other issues will be handled. Men will have less issues in court. Family court is notoriously biased against men. Court and period is notoriously biased against men, but family court especially is biased against men. If the man had the choice to control his own fertility and to choose when he had a child, there would be no accidents. There would be, for those who don't like the idea of abortion, well, there would be less abortion. For those who don't want unplanned pregnancies, there would be less unplanned pregnancies. The man would be in control of his fertility, the woman would be in control of her fertility, and at that point, having a child would become a willful choice, not an accident. So that's the primary part I'm working on. I think it's faster, quicker, and easier to get that done. This is something that can be done within 10 years. Changing the laws to grant men reproductive rights is likely to take much longer than 10 years, so I'm going for what's practical first.
When you say reproductive rights, you mean that the right to paternal surrender. That's the one you're
So
talking
the
about,
right
right?
to paternal surrender, the right to have the child genetically identified at birth, the right to choose to opt in as a parent or opt out as a parent without legal implications, social or political problems.
I'm sorry, I had my mic off. When you say opting out, isn't that the same thing as paternal surrender?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
For those who are interested in
However,
the
legal paternal surrender when it is biologically your offspring. If it is not biologically your offspring, that you not be obligated. I believe it's
I'm
one.
actually a little confused about this. This whole question about it not being your offspring and having paternity tests, is there some reason why you're mentioning this? Is this not the case right now? That
One. I can't give you a name. I can't give you the exact study, but approximately 1 in 3 children who are 1 in 3 children who are born are not raised by the father that they think is biologically theirs. 1 in 3.
And are you saying that right now men don't have the right to get a paternity test on a child they're raising?
I believe that they may, but it's not. It's not by law. What I would want to have is when the child is born, as soon as you're cutting the umbilical cord and doing all the other things that you're doing, you take a paternity test right on.
Why do you think that's necessary if anyone can have a paternity test done on their child whenever they want? Why would it
Because
be necessary for it to be done
no,
automatically?
and the reason is once you're legally the father, you're legally the father. Once your name goes on that piece of paper,
that's
if you
right.
decide 5 years later, I think this kid doesn't look like me, and I'm not sure that this is my kid, or a month after the child is born, once your name's on that piece of paper, you can't just go and say, oh, we need a redo, we need to scratch this out and get my name off this piece of paper.
Right.
So there's a real concern there because there have been cases of men who strongly suspected that some cuckoldry had gone on there, that the child wasn't theirs, but they came to that suspicion too late, and then it wouldn't matter that they could establish that the child was not biologically theirs.
They're still
They
obligated.
are on the hook, and if the relationship goes south, and you can imagine if you find out that your partner had another lover and the child you were raising is not yours, and that she may have known or may not have known, but in any case, it's not your biological child. I mean, there are people who enter into relationships who get married because they feel an obligation to the child that they think is theirs. And then if you find out, wait a minute, I entered into this marriage for this reason, and it's not even my kid. You'd want to know that. So actually, I'm quite sympathetic to that. For those who are interested in legal parental surrender, Girl Writes What is a YouTuber. Her name is Karen Strawn. Or just look up Girl Writes What. She's a YouTuber and a men's rights activist, and she makes really terrific, very, very well-argued videos, and she has some videos on the subject of legal parental surrender that will make you rethink things when you, no matter how strong you think you feel about this, it'll make you think.
I think it's legal paternal surrender.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, what did I say?
Parental.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And you said it much more eloquently than I did. Thank you.
And I understand now too. Okay, I wasn't understanding why there was a point to that, but now I see why there's a point to that.
Yeah, that was actually very. I never would have considered that. Now, here's something else. What other rights besides reproductive rights are men's rights activists agitating for?
Well, that would be a case-by-case asking what their favorite bailiwick is. What do feminists fight for? Well, a feminist can't fight for every single right in law, or everybody has their own particular bailiwick. Is that it?
Yeah, bailiwick. Yeah.
Everybody has.
What are some others, though? I mean, they don't have to be yours. I'm not gonna ask you to defend views or.
Others would be father's rights. We do have the right in law to have to be treated fairly, But unfortunately, it's not always the case that these laws are applied. There is systematic discrimination and bias in the courts. So for some, it might be actually applying an equitable law to both parties. What would be other things that people work for? Some people work more on the social aspect. Some people work more on the political or the economic aspect. If there are those who are interested in seeing a menu of these things, I'd recommend that they take a look at voiceformen.com, and you'll find the full menu of everybody's preferences and what they're working on.
Okay, here's a loaded question. Why do MRAs seem to dislike feminists so much?
Because if we are careful with the definition of feminism and we use this very convenient duality of equity feminism and gender feminism, when I speak of gender feminism, my personal point of view is specifically radical feminism. The radical feminism is an ideology that starts off with factual errors, builds upon it, and is fundamentally a bigoted and hate movement. And when I say bigoted, I mean in favor of women, specifically working to the detriment of men's powers, men's rights, men's equality in culture, in politics, in economics, and in law. The propaganda that is put out, for the same reason that Ilana no longer refers to herself as a feminist because there's just all that weirdness going on. These are the people that men's rights activists will typically rail against. And notice that I said these people, not these women, because feminists can be men or women. Feminism is not women. Feminism is an ideology. Women are human beings. Okay, so an ideology can be adhered to by a man or a woman, and typically they promote messages that are harmful, that are negative towards men, that debase men socially, culturally, politically, that work towards effacing men's agency, and that's not well said. That basically they get in the way of men actually enjoying the rights that they do have.
Okay, now when you say this though, are you suggesting that this is a deliberate and conscious objective, or that this is just a result and they don't care if you know what, if something falls under their wheels, they don't care, or that this is somehow deliberate? Because it sounds a little sinister the way you're putting it.
Some of it is sinister. However, I will add the caveat that not all of it is sinister. You get fruitcakes and nutcases in every ideology. And there are people who actively work against men being able to enjoy. There are people who promote the notion that castrating men is a great idea. You know, seriously. There are
I know there are. Actually, there's a fairly notorious YouTuber and vlogger who does this, but I have a feeling that she's a Poe.
Maybe. However, there are others who are not Poes who have the same sort of attitudes. Radicals and nutcases will be found in every ideology. I do not tar all feminists with this nutbaggery. But it is important to understand that there are people in power. We're talking about prime ministers, we're talking about people who work in the government, we're talking about editors, we're talking about lawyers, we're talking about people of significant import in our society who actively work towards these things. I would say the majority is, the majority of the people that MRAs rail against who also adopt the nomenclature of feminism are people who view things from a bigoted point of view. And for the definition of bigoted, please look at the Wikipedia definition. It suits exactly what it is that I'm trying to express. I'll leave that as an exercise to the reader or to the listener. I believe that a lot of feminists come across literally as bigoted, and their actions are bigoted. An example, I believe both of you are atheists, is that correct? So you might
Yes,
be,
we are.
Yeah.
so you might be familiar with the A plus movement.
Yeah.
You may be,
Yes.
and if you are, you may be familiar with the term Schrodinger's rapist.
Yeah.
I'm not actually, no.
Well, you know the story of Schrodinger's cat, right? Is it there? Is it not there? I think it was Greta Christina, I believe, who wrote an article entitled Schrodinger's Rapist, basically saying that all women fear all men because any one of you at any moment could be the rapist that jumps out of the bushes and grabs us. We don't know, so back off, buddy. This is a piece of utter bigotry. Um, I would say that the term Schrodinger's rapist is equivalent to the term nigger. That's how offensive, that's how bigoted I consider the term to be. And there are many of these people who have this attitude, yet because they are wrapped up in the sense of we want to be good to women, we want to be fair to women, which I happen to agree with because as equal human beings, we should be fair and decent and kind and equal to each other. However, their way of doing it is to debase the male population. So this is a literal bigotry. So why do many men's rights advocates rail against this kind of attitude? Because we don't like being called rapists when we're not. We don't like being called misogynists when we're not. We don't like being considered perpetrators by default. We don't like it that the laws make it so that anytime there's a domestic dispute, a cop by default arrests the man. These things make us angry, and we express anger towards those who treat us this way. Consider that in the late 60s, early 70s, feminists were considered the angry people. You know, you're just an angry feminist. You're a man-hating lesbian, so on and so forth.
As an
Well,
as an atheist, I've heard that I'm an angry atheist more times than I can count. So I can certainly I know exactly where you're going with this. And, you know, as a MRA, you're one of those angry woman haters, just as
exactly,
feminists used to be angry man haters and bra
precisely.
burners and all this stuff.
Precisely. Our message is starting to be heard, and unfortunately, when men speak gently and courteously and kindly, we're ignored. When the only time it seems these days when a man is listened to is when he expresses anger. If that's what it takes to get the message out, it is the most effective tool. We
Actually,
will.
I disagree with that.
We
I
will.
think that
Yeah.
I really disagree with that. I think that when I've watched videos of men's rights activists, and I haven't watched a lot, I've mostly watched Girl Writes What, but I've watched a few with men, and I find that when they come across calmly, it's when I'm more inclined to listen to them than when they come across angry. Because when they come across angry, they really do come across a bit like women haters.
Sure.
And I don't think that's going to help your movement at all.
Well,
Yeah,
Dina,
actually, can I interject here?
please.
I want to echo what Ilana was saying, expound on it a little bit. We have the stereotype of the angry feminist who sounds shrill and hysterical, right?
Yes.
This is a stereotype, right? And feminists have long observed that, you know, it's very hard to get anything done as a feminist and advance your cause if you're meek and mild and
Yes.
too genteel. You've got to get in people's faces. That the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and if that just means that people occasionally call you, you know, shrill and hysterical, then so be it. That's the price that they're willing to pay, and you know that, you know, so who cares? But I think it works. It works a little differently when men sound angry. Men, when they sound angry, sound much more menacing. They don't sound hysterical. They don't just sound irrational. They sound bloody dangerous.
And why do you think that?
And now that might be the kind of sexism that is and misandry that is operative in our culture. But I mean, I think that when a man kind of glares into the camera, and the veins in his neck. But no, you're not. But I mean, I saw a video that where this was happening. The veins are popping out of a guy's neck. That's not a pretty sight. That doesn't sound shrill and hysterical. That sounds like a guy who maybe he beats his wife. So
but does it get your
I think it's very counterproductive. I mean, I think that men have to act up, but I think that anger from men is perceived completely, it's evaluated completely differently than anger in women.
Well, results have demonstrated differently.
Well, maybe I stand corrected. It's your movement, so you.
Well, no. It's not.
It's my feedback. No, but I mean, I don't self-identify as a MRA.
Yes. In the beginning, I also had the same fear. Let's just don't be so harsh, man. Don't be so aggressive. It's like, can you tone it down? It's the tone. And really, my concern when I was asking other MRAs to tone it down, my fear was that we would appear so aggressive that it would turn people off our message. But results have demonstrated that it is this sheer expression without apology, without excuse, this utter forthright directness, without concern for oversensitivity, that has caused the message to, one, resonate with men, two, to be listened to by people who don't necessarily have all of the issues, know all of the issues, and who aren't familiar. So the results, I'm convinced now that really this was a tactical move that was initiated by, I would say, Paul Elam, founder of Voice for Men. And at the beginning, I had the very same trepidations that you do, and I went, oh man, guys, we're all so dangerous and scary and stuff. But we're not, because that's a form of sexism. But he nailed the head. He nailed it right, in that this is a strategy most effective for getting our voices heard, and it works. So that's where I set that piece down.
Actually, I'm wondering if it's appealing to other men, and that's why it's working.
I would agree.
Yeah, it might be that men are men might be turned off by a quiet tone, and feel that when they hear that, the men's rights movement comes off as kind of wimpy and whiny. But a more aggressive, angry tone might appeal to other men. But what concerns me is that it will seriously alienate women. I mean,
interestingly enough, let me ask you a question. Do you feel alienated by my speech?
No, but I don't think you're coming off as angry.
Okay, that's because you're listening.
I don't know. I don't think there's anything angry about your tone at all. I don't think anyone would think there was.
My experience is that some of the most, and I love this and I hate this, that some of the most effective men's rights advocates are women. For some reason, women are listened to, they're taken more seriously. If a woman says it, it's okay. There's a permission that goes with it. When men speak, there seems to be not that permission. Listen, you're just a misogynist, you're just a woman hater, you're privileged, you've got everything going for you, you're the oppressor, why should we listen to you? But when a woman speaks, all of a sudden, something shifts gears in people. And I will admit that Girl Writes What, in her speaking, I found a permission to express myself. I don't express myself as well as I'd like, but for the first time, and it's really a horrible thing to say, that I needed a woman's permission to speak up unconsciously, and I think that it doesn't turn a lot of women off. Well, no, sorry. It may turn some people off, It may, but it doesn't turn them all off. And what we find is there are more and more and more women who are becoming men's rights activists alongside with us because they care about what we care. It's that both sides have the cookies and both sides have to bake them.
I'm not surprised that someone like Karen Strawn or Girl Writes What has more impact than any man. Like as Ilana said, you know, if when men complain about, oh, I'm being hard done by, and you know, especially when they're talking about rights that they see as having been eroded by contemporary feminism, that's going to seem like a lot of whining. And
by the way, you speak very well.
Me? Thank you. Yeah, I wish I didn't stammer so much, but but thank you. But I mean, it stands to reason that that when a woman like Karen Strawn does this, because there's no question that she's you know, oh, she's a woman hater, like that's just completely unrealistic, right? And anyone who would try to level the charge that, oh, she's operating under a false consciousness, that she's a self-loathing woman or something like that, I mean, you just need to watch a few of her videos and see the confidence and the intelligence that she exudes. There isn't a chance that you're going to be able to sell this to anybody whose mind isn't already made up on the matter. So of course it makes a huge difference because men sound like whining complainers when they're complaining about, oh, you know, I'm being hard done by. You know, men are supposed to be strong and stoic and that sort of thing.
Double standard.
So yeah, there's a double standard there. Yeah, so it's no surprise that some of the heroes of this movement are the heroines of in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that completely unsurprising, and you know, obviously we need more women on that side to balance out what I see as genuine problems coming out of contemporary feminism and gender feminism.
It doesn't hurt that she's like hyper smart too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could make videos the way she does. Good grief.
Well, I'm sure I believe at some point she says she takes about an average of a week to write out, like something like 20, 30 minutes worth of speech. So, you know, she has merited her position because she does it by hard work.
Yeah, no, her stuff is so well scripted, and you can tell that she's rehearsed her videos before. She doesn't just read them cold after writing them. She's rehearsed them. And her stuff is being picked up now. I mean, there are university professors who are teaching courses in cultural studies, media studies, women's studies courses and things like that, who are picking this stuff up. Political science courses. They're picking up her stuff and you know, showing her videos in classes and stuff like that. I mean, my entire interest in this subject is very, very newfangled, and it's entirely because I stumbled across her videos, and I was just blown away. Sort of some scales actually fell from my eyes as a result of watching her videos. But anyway, I didn't mean this to be a big shameless plug for her videos this way. But I'm impressed with her anyway.
She deserves it.
Absolutely.
She's convinced me on a couple of topics.
And while we're at it, you know, everybody praises Karen, and she merits it. But I think that everyone else should be praised. You know, we got so many men and women who are working so hard and who are so smart. They don't have the renown that she does, but I think that they all deserve a pat on the back. You know,
I have to actually admit I haven't watched anybody who's an MRA other than Karen Strawn and a couple of Warren. What's his name? Sorry.
Warren Farrell.
Yeah, a couple of little videos by him, but very short ones. So really, all of my everything I've learned about MRA is from Karen Strawn, and I don't know. There might be many other people in the field that are just as good as her.
If you want, and if there's demand for it, or just if you're interested, what I can do is I can provide you with a list of YouTube channels of people really worth listening to. What you'll notice is that there's great diversity in the flavors of the voices. There are many unique individuals who speak very intelligently, very clearly, very articulately, ranging from slapstick funny to academic serious to everything in between. I can provide you with a list of YouTube channels for you people to look at. I can put it on my blog. I can email it to you.
Just put it on your blog, and I can put a link in the description of this video to your blog, so that I don't have a big, huge long list in the description box.
Can you just name a few of them, though? I'm curious.
Man, Woman, Myth, Stardust,
yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
Barbarossa.
John the Other?
John the Other, definitely. He's one of the guys who really started cracking my shell. Who else?
It's the only other one I know.
Okay, those I've actually all heard of from Girl Writes What. She's mentioned all of those as well. So, okay, good.
So, yeah, my blog is Francis D. Roy. It's Francis, the letter D, ROY.wordpress.com. If you check that out sometime today or tomorrow after we're done this call, I'll stick a list of channels that I think are worth recommending.
All right, I'll put a link in the description box, or maybe even in the video, so that people. What's that?
You have a blog yourself?
No, I don't. But I do. It's unrelated to any of the sort of controversial stuff I do under this username. I have another username, but and I blog about different things that have nothing to do with this. So.
If anyone in the comments section has any questions they want to ask, now might be a good time, because I think we're going to be wrapping it up soon.
Yeah, we've been going just a little over 2 hours, and I'd kind of like to wrap it up now, and maybe we can take this up another time.
Yep.
Should we give them a chance to ask a question or two, though?
Yeah, sure. Folks, if you have a question, please bang it out quickly now. There's a little bit of lag. It'll take a little bit before we see the questions.
Right. I'll tell you what, while you collect those, can you give me 2 to 3 minutes away from the screen?
Sure.
I don't know that I can fill the air with words that long.
Well, can you dance?
No, but look, you don't have to worry about the links. Any links and information that you want, just take your time, put it together. It takes a while for this video to get processed and uploaded and all that, and then we can get all that stuff in the description box.
Right.
More people will see this after it's aired than are watching it now. We have 8 viewers who happen to be watching it now, so over time, other people will see this. So we can put links there. I'd like people who are interested in the subject to look this up, because this is a subject I'm curious about and I'm fairly ambivalent about. So I was eager to talk to somebody about it. So anyway, that's great. Do we have any questions coming in? Let's take a look here.
I'm not seeing any yet. Hang on.
Okay. Well, if not, that's just fine. We can just wrap it up.
All right. Were there any questions that you guys had that weren't addressed, or?
Probably not now. Stuff will likely come to mind as this sort of percolates and sort of spreads out through the network in my head, and I can always fire off questions to you. And if we think that maybe we can do another one, We'll see if this video generates any interest. We can do that.
Sure.
And you said you have a blog. Feel free, if you want, to embed this video in your blog.
You'll have to send me links and all that.
Yeah, sure. That would be no problem. You just share it like any other video. Just like you would get any other video. But there'd be no problem with that.
All right.
Okay. Well, let's call it here then. So, Francis Roy, thank you very much. This has been really informative, and it's been fun too. And Ilana, thank you too. This is great. I really appreciate you helping me out with the comments and stuff. I'm new to this technology, so this helps.
And I thank you both for a really balanced point of view, a reasonable point of view. You guys are just fun to talk to. I got that when we were doing the Magic Sandwich show, and I'm very pleased to see that it wasn't an exception. If you're interested in doing this at any time in the future, I'm more than happy to. You guys are cool.
Okay. Actually, Francis, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I thought that you gave an excellent sort of intro to MRA, and I mean, I didn't think you came off as angry, which I don't know. Personally, I still think that's a good thing.
Well, that's great.
All right. Nice talking to you, Francis.
Thank you, and see you later.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.